Hello, my friends. Thank you for clicking on episode 22 of my series of stories that I'm doing showing my exciting journey through mental health and my horrible choices and terrible decisions. And then ultimately, at the very end of it all, God restoring me and reestablishing me, and most importantly, rescuing me. I decided to have a little bit of fun with this one, do it in front of a fireplace and with a smoking jacket complete with patches. Unfortunately, I don't have a pipe, so this is really just a jacket. But I've decided that it's time to wrap up my time in Denver. There are so many more stories I could tell, but as I said in a previous episode, I'm tired of living it. I'm tired of going through this all over again in my mind. So I'm going to strive really hard to finish my time in Denver with just 2 more episodes, and this being the first one. But first, I need to give a quick few details to set up the story. A little less than a year ago, I bought a new to me used car. It was a Dodge Daytona. It was total junk. There was always something wrong with this car, but at least it was wheels when those wheels would actually turn. Also, if I remember correctly, April had a really old Toyota Corolla or Tercel. I don't remember exactly what it was. It doesn't matter. This thing was always breaking down too. It was really rare if both of our cars were working at the same time. What was less rare was both of them being out of commission at the same time. That happened more often. So when that happened, that usually meant that the 2 of us and April's mom, we all had to find a way to share her ancient Chevy Astro minivan, which was always on the fritz, constantly breaking down. April's dad was a fairly decent mechanic. I mean, he could do minor repairs and stuff, but the thing is, he didn't have a ton of time to fix the never-ending carousel of broken down junker cars all parked at this one house. So here's a quick story that was very key in helping me get home. I had quit Blackjack Pizza and gotten a much better paying job doing temp work for Janus Mutual Funds. Basically, what I was doing was I was answering the phone and helping move millionaires' stock back and forth between their different funds. It was fun. It was fun talking to these people, talking to these, Texas oil tycoon type folks. And the pay was definitely better than delivering pizzas. But as I said, unfortunately, it was temporary. But I had this routine that I would do every day when I left Janus before I would fight the insane Denver after work rush hour traffic, which was just beyond horrible. Some of the worst rush hour traffic I have ever experienced in my life. Before I left, I was getting my car. Before I would take off, I would get myself good and stoned so I could be prepared and deal with the madness. It made it so much more bearable, because what should have been in a normal time of the day, a 15, maybe 20-minute drive, was easily 45 to 50 minutes. It was just agony. So on one particular day, I was driving April's mom's van. It was the middle of the summer, so it was bonkers hot. There was some kind of heat wave. I don't know if it's still a record, but it was at that point for the most consecutive 90 plus degree days in a row in Denver. I think it was like 14 days in a row, I think. It was just so hot. And April's family, they didn't have AC in their house. So that was a really rough summer. It was awful. So her mom's van had this terrible habit of overheating, which meant you had to pull it off to the side and wait for like 15, 30 minutes for it to cool down before it would start back up and you can drive it away. Sure enough, it died right in the middle of this crazy, super busy intersection on my way home from, during rush hour. I'm holding up all the traffic. I'm just sitting there in the middle, and all these cars are trying to go around me, and it was just so embarrassing. So I get out, I push this big old van off to the side and off the shoulder, and that's where I'm sitting. A few minutes later, a cop comes by and sees me, and so he comes to check on me. Now, remember, I'm really baked at this point, so now I'm getting kind of nervous. I decide, I'm like, okay, calm down. I'm going to sober up real quick. And I apparently got to the point where I could explained the situation to the cop and how to sit and wait for a little bit without sounding like a total pothead. If he was suspicious, he did not care. He basically said he's just going to get back in his car and kind of push my van up to one of these side roads, side streets where I could just kind of sit and wait for it to cool down. He said he'd come back and check on me an hour, see if I needed any more help or a tow or whatever. He was a very cool cop. So here I am sitting in this beat up junker in a very, very nice Denver suburban neighborhood. I mean, nothing but McMansions as far as the eye could see. I looked so out of place. Like I said, it was also really, really hot. So I had to roll down the window, which really did not help. So up the road a little bit, I could see a couple houses that a mom and her little girl, her daughter, were doing a lemonade stand. I'm thinking, I'm going to go put this mom, put her mind at ease because I'm some creeper guy in this beat up van just sitting there in their neighborhood because, like I said, I looked so out of place. So I went up there and explained the situation. She's like, don't worry about it. I understand. No big deal. She's like, you want some lemonade for free? I'm like, thanks, but that's okay. I'm all right. Believe me, I desperately wanted it because I was so hot. I was just so embarrassed. I was just sick of it. I was sick of always breaking down in any one of these 3 cars. So I go back to the van, I wait. And a couple minutes later, the mom sends her little girl over to me with a nice ice cold can of soda. So the little girl walks up to, up to their driver's side and she kind of hands it up to me, and I thanked her, and I leaned out, I yelled at Mom, I was like, thank you so much, thank you. I mean, it nearly brought tears to my eyes. It was just such a sweet gesture. I have no idea if this woman was a Christian or not, but I'm telling you, God used her to help me by sending me something cold to drink. It also got my attention, which God was doing a lot of that at this time, keeping my eyes constantly directed towards him, constantly wandering off, trying to stay there, but God's like, no, look at me over here. So eventually the van started, I went home. Another quick story. I haven't really touched on any of this at any point in the stories, but I did mention how few stories back, I was always trying to accomplish suicide by God. I could never bring myself to end it all, but maybe if I put myself in enough stupid and dangerous situations, God would be like, I'm done with this idiot, and snuff me out. About 2 years before this time frame that I'm retelling, I began excessive mountain climbing. I was always climbing mountains. It was just so relaxing. I loved it. I loved the challenge of it. The thing is, at not one time did I ever use ropes or any safety precautions. I mean, I didn't have proper footwear on. I was just wearing sneakers. And I always climbed alone. And I just kept hoping that maybe this would be the time that I would lose my purchase of rock on the side and fall to my death. But here I am in my smoking jacket, obviously not dead. So I also began climbing a lot more regularly at this last few months in Denver. If April was working, I had nothing else to do. So I remember one day I decided I want to go try to find that awesome campsite that Jake and I went to do the mushrooms, that one story I told you about. I hadn't been back since that one time with Jake. So I did remember the road this time. If you remember back from that story, we had a hard time finding the road. So I found it, but when I did find it, I was so stunned and saddened by what I found. Apparently, a few months back, a major raging forest fire tore through that area and destroyed hundreds and hundreds of acres of forest, including our campsite. Our beautiful, amazing campsite was now just ash and charred trees. It pretty much looked like a nuclear bomb had gone off. I didn't see it at that point, but I definitely see it now, especially as I retell this story. That whole burnt campsite was just a fantastic symbol for what was about to happen to my time in Denver. Denver was everything for me. It was just beautiful and glorious, and it was just amazing. That campsite was beautiful and glorious and amazing. Now it's nothing, completely gone. That whole thing was kind of prophetic. Another quick story. I need to close out my chapter about involving Emily and her husband, Dave. Emily was my big sister at that amazing job that I worked for. When Amber and I got in that apartment, and I had told you a different story that Emily did not like Amber, did not trust her, could see her for who she was. So I stopped hanging out really with Emily and Dave at that point. I think I was just so embarrassed because I should have listened to Emily and not hung out with Amber. But anyway, now that I'm with April, I thought, I really want them to meet her. I wanted them to meet her, period. So they invited us over for dinner one night, and Emily approved of April immediately. She totally loved her until she found out that she was a meth addict and it turned me into one too. You see, Emily had a really rough childhood. She was exposed to all kinds of drugs from her family and other terrible sources. And also early on in their marriage that Dave unfortunately got himself addicted to cocaine. Now, he eventually overcame it and had been clean and sober from harsh stuff. But now that he had meth pretty much exposed to him and just kind of there in his home, I became really fascinated by it. And I could see in Emily's eyes she was not liking this at all. So she stepped in and immediately put a stop to it. She told me that, sorry, Jeremy, we love you, but you can't come back to our house if you're still doing meth. I understood. I didn't want to still be doing meth, but I was addicted to it. So at the end of that one night, I hugged them both, told them I loved them, thanked them for all that they had done for me, which was a lot. I love them. I miss them sometimes. They're just amazing people. But I said goodbye. I never saw them again. In a way, that goodbye was the beginning of many more sad goodbyes to come. The most saddest of all goodbyes was going to be to April, which was right around the corner. We got one more story to go to hear that goodbye. So now I'm at my final 2-month period of Denver, and all the constant party hopping and drug deals and the shady back alleys and the camping out in these secluded parking garages away from the security cameras just so we could do some drugs. That all stopped. We were now hanging out exclusively at this one dingy, disgusting apartment where all of our collected closest friends gathered to, waste our lives away doing drugs. I don't even remember how we discovered this apartment. I think one of our friends knew somebody who knew somebody, one of those routines. This apartment was active pretty much 24/7. April and I, we had to, we couldn't stay all night because we promised to keep to a curfew so that her mom could kind of, be at ease, not be worried about us all night because we weren't coming home. So, but typically the very next morning, we usually end up back there late in the morning or early afternoon or whatever. If we had nothing else to do, we were pretty much always there. Sometimes when we got there would already be a bunch of people there, or sometimes it'd just be a couple. But one person that was always there was a guy that everybody pretty much just called Dude on the Couch. Nobody knew his name, and nobody could remember where he came from. He was just there one day and pretty much never left. He was basically homeless. He was in his early 20s, if I remember correctly. He was always scrounging whatever drugs he could get from anybody who came and went from that place. It was just very sad situation. I just feel so bad that no one knew his name, this poor kid. But quick story about this apartment, and then I'm going to wrap up this whole thing with a cliffhanger. Because this apartment complex, the whole thing was basically the projects, there was always a cop in the parking lot because eventually cops are going to get called there anyway for something going on in any one of the numerous apartments in this building. So whenever April and I had to leave, we always tried to do it when either the cop was called away to do something else, or if we were sober enough to walk back to our car without raising any suspicion. One particular night, somebody had a bag of mushrooms, one of the random people coming and going, and he was trying to sell them for a quick buck. And April knew I loved the stuff, but she never wanted to mess with it, so she bought it for me, and I dove right in. I remember this vividly. I remember the layout of this apartment vividly. I'm kind of sitting in a lazy boy kind of like this, and over here is the door into this apartment. And I'm just sitting there enjoying what I had just ingested and definitely enjoying the live action drama unfolding in front of me. People coming and going from that door, people goofing around, hanging out, playing the Nintendo 64, the TV was over here. It was very chill, very peaceful night, which it usually was because the one rule of this place was no drama. Do not bring your drama here. So the stuff that I was seeing, it suddenly turned really ugly. It didn't necessarily freak me out, but it made me really sad. What had happened was, I remember watching the door open and this super large dragon kind of duck his head and walk into the apartment, just kind of look around, and then light the place on fire. Just blue fire everywhere. The whole place was burning. Then he walked over to dude on the couch and ate him, and then he left. I was so sad. I'm like, oh man, that was messed up. Now, a couple weeks later, whatever. This is all coincidence. Do not read into the story. I beg you. I found out that some angry drug dealers had barged their way into this apartment, put a shotgun in dude on the couch's face, and tell him, "You got one day to get our money back to us, or you're dead." Dude disappeared. Nobody saw him again. Nobody knows if he skipped town or if he ended up in a dumpster. Such a sad ending to that poor kid. A couple of days later, after this event with dude, the cops finally raided this place and hauled everybody off to jail, which was really no surprise because there was a ton of drugs constantly flowing through this place. Thankfully, none of my inner circle, closest friends were there. Obviously, April and I were not there either. So, final story, last one of this episode, and I'm going to wrap it up and hand it on a cliffhanger, like I said. So, go back 2 weeks before the apartment got raided. I'm at about the 1 month mark. Okay, I had loaned Adam some money a few days back, and he really wanted to pay me back because I helped him out of a pinch. So he had gotten a big bag of just super grade, really super grade meth. So he wanted to take me to a secluded place and just get me impossibly high. April was working at that time, so it was just going to be the two of us. So the secluded place that we picked was a place that April and I would go to on occasion, which was a department store parking lot. I know it sounds absurd, but trust me, it's less suspicious if you're in your car acting casual amongst a bunch of people coming and going than it is being by yourself in some dark back alley somewhere. So I'm going to finish this story as delicately as I can. Adam and I had been there for close to 2 hours, okay? The two of us had smoked almost this entire bag down to nothing. The amount that we went through is pretty much the same amount that April and I would go through in 3 days worth of time. He and I did it in 2 hours. Suffice to say, we were utterly out of our minds. The way we did, this is the routine that we always would do, is that when whoever's turn it was to take a hit, they would duck down below the window, and the other one would just kind of like, casually scan the area for any looky-loos or especially cops showing up. Well, it was my turn. Adam had spaced out and he wasn't paying attention, looking out the passenger window. I ducked down, took my hit, and when I came back up, I'm in the driver's side, and I look out my window to blow out my hit through the open window. A cop was parked there. Cop in the car was staring at me, looking right at me. My eyes widen as I slowly blow the smoke out. His eyes, the cop's eyes, they're boring into my guilty as sin eyes. It was, Adam and I were completely, unequivocally busted. I'm going to conclude what happened next time. Include what happened when that cop got out of his car. All right, I'm going to wrap this up. I want to touch back a little bit on something I'd wrapped up the last episode and how I read, from Matthew and talked about knowing a true sheep from a sheep in wolf's clothing. And I talked about how you will know them by their fruits. I'm going to touch on that really quick. One of the biggest things that non-church goers hate about Christians is they are always accusing us of being hypocritical and judgmental. Those are valid complaints because many of us are. And that's because we're still sinners, okay? I said before that just because you give your life to Jesus and you are now a true follower of his, it does not mean you stop sinning. Christians will never stop sinning until they're in heaven. So many Christians, I've known many Christians, including myself, that have fallen off the path. They've gone by the wayside and they are living a term that some pastors use as carnal Christians. The problem is, okay, you will know the fruit, that statement, you will know their fruit if they're living in unrepentant, habitual sin. Like if at no time that Christian repents and confesses their sin and gets their life squared away, if that never happens, if they continue and never repent, then that's their fruit. That you can tell. But here comes the judgmental part of it. Only God knows how much time is allotted for that person to live that life. Just because you go through 2 whole days of the same sin over and over again, it does not mean there's no fruit. I went for 3 years. I've known people go longer. God ultimately knows how long he will allow one of his children to wander off before he comes and corrects them and shows them the error of their ways and gets their life back on track. It's not up to us. We are not the ones who are allowed to judge. That's why it says, judge not lest ye be judged. Well, that's one of the favorite verses of people who hate churchgoers. Don't judge me. So I wanted to just finish that up in there and just say, I recognize how hypocritical I sound. But know this, because I am here now, I know that I am a true believer because I repented and got my life squared away. So, again, if all this stuff seems foggy and crazy and you don't get this whole sin thing and true fruit and all that, please, I continually direct you to my website. Go. There are links there explaining what being a true believer in Jesus Christ looks like. And if you want to just talk, if you don't really want to talk about Bible stuff, you want to talk about mental health stuff, that's fine too. Send me a message. Tell your story. Let the community come and pray for you. All right, my friends. Come back. See what happens for my final episode in Denver and how God finally brings me home. Until then, keep pressing on.